We've been fighting a long time. We are outnumbered. But you are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the Earth.
This is Jim Coyle.
If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
We gotta find this guy.
If you're frustrated and concerned about the future, if you're ready to speak out, if you're ready to stand up and take action, to defend liberty at all costs, you are the people we're looking for. Welcome to Resistance Radio.
Good evening and welcome to a very special edition of Resistance Radio. It is November 18th, and in just a couple of short days, we will be recognizing 49 years since the assassination of our president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. For the next 2 hours, we will be looking at the JFK assassination from many different angles. I have a very special guest on the phone with me tonight that I'm very honored to have with me. This is Arthur Harry A. Yardum. And Harry, welcome to the program tonight.
Yes, hello, Jim. How are you?
Good, excellent. So glad to have you with me tonight as we take the next 2 hours to really look at what happened 49 years ago in Dallas this month. It was obviously something that changed the shape of the nation and the world.
It did, and it still, to this day, has got a long-lasting effect on many, many people.
Absolutely. You know, I think that there are really three key moments in American history that changed the face of how we deal with things and look at things, and that is the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the assassination of JFK, and 9/11. And I think, you know, obviously there have been many other tragedies and many other things that have happened to us over the course of our existence as a nation, but those three in modern times are moments that really have changed who we were as a people in one way or another, changed our direction, changed the way we look at things, and you know, were really moments that we felt collectively as a nation.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. So now, Harry, you have written a book. It's called JFK: The Grassy Knoll Witnesses. And
Correct.
you know, before we get into that, just tell me a little bit of how you first initially got into researching JFK and to examining the assassination. Tell me how that happened.
The name of the book is The Grassy Knoll Witnesses Who Shot JFK. My Facebook page is JFK, The Grassy Knoll Witnesses. So it's just reversed a little.
Gotcha.
When I was 13, Robert Kennedy had just been shot in June of '68. And I remember waking up early in the morning because it happened in the middle of the night, and it was very traumatic, even for a young 13-year-old kid, and my sister was 15 at the time. And 2 months later, in August of 1968, my family made a business/vacation trip to Texas because my grandfather was in the snack food business and had a plant in Dallas. So when we were going to go to Dallas, the Robert Kennedy assassination was fresh in my mind. And I said to my parents, I said, Mom, Dad, I'd like to go drive through this Dealey Plaza where John F. Kennedy was shot. And not knowing anything about the case except that it happened there, and I had heard the official story. And the cab driver drove us, before he took us to the hotel, he drove us down Elm Street, pointed to the grassy knoll, and said that the shot that killed Kennedy came from the grassy knoll. And he also said something to me that I never forgot, which hurt my feelings so much. He said, and being 13 or a young kid, you can remember certain things people say and do.
No, absolutely.
After he pointed to the fence, said the shot, and went under through the underpass as we're driving to get onto the 7th Freeway, he turned his head, he looks at me, and he goes, and the guy who shot Martin Luther King, I'll vote for him for president.
Wow.
So right there, I said, what kind of a town is this? This is pretty crazy. This person is saying this to me. I'm a young kid. You don't say that to anybody, but
Wow.
to a young kid, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
I said, man, what hate this man must have.
Yeah.
So then the next day, we went over to the plant, which was he was in the snack food business.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went back to Dealey Plaza with some of the employees from the plant, from the factory. And they also took me back behind the fence and said, the shot that killed him came from here. They go, everybody in this town knows that. It's being covered up. So I remember looking at the depository window from the street below and then going over to the grassy knoll. And I was so mad, I remember kicking this fence. I said, man, this... I don't know, what's a young kid supposed to think? So I kicked the fence. I had this rock. I was going to throw it at the depository window. I mean, I was like kind of traumatized. You know?
Sure.
What do I do next? So the first book I bought on the case was a 1968 book called Assassination: The Death of President John F. Kennedy, and it was written by a New York City I believe he was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author or reporter by the name of Relman Morin.
All right, hold that thought, Harry. We're going to be right back with Harry Yardum. If you have a question, please feel free to pick up the phone and give us a call, 502-571-0970. I know JFK can be a personal issue for some people. Let's keep our feelings in check and look at this objectively. We'll be right back with more on Resistance Radio on 970 WGTK.
Don't miss your daily dose of debate, The Michael Medved Show, weekday afternoons at 3 on 970 WGTK.
Okay, welcome back to a very special edition of Resistance Radio. It's the JFK assassination, a 49-year reflection. My special guest tonight, Harry Yardum, author of the book, Who Shot JFK? Well, tell me again, it's JFK, The Grassy Knoll Witnesses.
That's
the Facebook page.
The name of the book is The Grassy Knoll Witnesses: Who Shot JFK.
Okay, gotcha. I get them flipped around. I apologize.
That's all right.
We were talking a little bit about how you first got interested in the JFK assassination, and then you were just about ready when we went to that break to tell us about the first book that you picked up on the investigation. So tell us about that.
The first book I picked up was when we were still in Texas. Because it was not just a business trip, it was also pleasure. We went to San Antonio, and they had a thing going on there called Hemisphere 68. It was kind of like the World's Fair.
Okay.
And we drove all over, went to Fort Worth, and I picked up this first book, and in 1960, and this was not a conspiracy book. This was more like the day Kennedy was shot, or just kind of like telling the story, getting a little bit into the conspiracy theories, but not really. It's more, it was like a paperback drugstore book that you pick up in the airport. And
gotcha.
had some nice pictures in it. I had a picture of the Mormon photo, which was so well known, and a couple other good photos. And around that time, in the year before that, in '67, there were many, many books that were released on the case, starting with with the Rush to Judgment and the Second Oswald and Inquest. So I started to get all of them, and I started collecting these books and reading them, starting at 13. Now I'm 57.
Wow.
So I have at least 500 books on the Kennedy assassination and numerous other one-of-a-kind items.
Wow.
And it just led to many years of research, and I went back again in '91 for a weekend, and it was a month before they started to film JFK, and I didn't even know that they were going to film it.
Oh, wow.
I went in February of '91 on a Friday night. I left work, went to the airport, got there on a Friday night, and then left on a Sunday afternoon. And at that time in Dallas, there was an organization called the JFK Assassination Information Center. And these gentlemen were very personable, and they gave me a tour of all the sites where Officer Tippit was killed and Oswald's grave and this and that. And they were working on a lot of different aspects of the case. And then the founder of that organization, Larry Howard, had a stroke and had passed away.
Mm.
So when he passed away, the center folded, and that was that.
That's a shame.
But yeah, still today, believe it or not, every year since the Kennedy assassination occurred, at least a half a dozen to a dozen books are released every year.
Oh, yeah.
Even this year in 2012, there have been several released already and several more coming out. So it's a subject that just will not go away and it will not die. People still care about the truth.
Well, absolutely. Probably now as much as ever, people want the truth. And, you know, you look at this case, and from the very beginning, all the way through until right now, you still have a majority, 75 to 80% of the population of the United States that never bought into the Warren Commission, that just saw right through the Warren Commission for what it was. Which was a slap together, quick answer to settle people's nerves and move on.
Well, there was a file that was, many files that were classified, but one of them, which came out in a book by Harold Weisberg, I think it was called Whitewash 4, there was a transcript of the Warren Commission that was classified where they're discussing the rumor that Oswald was an agent of Hoover's FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we can't let this out. I mean, even if it's not true or a rumor or whatever. And Weisberg, through the Freedom of Information Act, which he pushed to see go through, actually released the minutes of this file and published it in 1974 in his book.
Wow.
There's many different aspects of the Warren Commission. I'm sure that a lot of the seasoned researchers have heard the recordings of President Johnson telling Richard B. Russell that he must serve on the Warren Commission, and Richard Russell is telling him, I don't like Earl Warren. I don't trust that man. I have no confidence in him. I don't want to do it. And Johnson said, well, it's already been announced. You must do this. And not only that, before the Warren report was released, he refused to sign it because he didn't believe the single bullet theory. He's discussing this with Johnson, and Johnson says, I don't believe the single bullet theory either. See, Johnson's on the other end of the phone. He's saying, well, what does it matter?
Yeah.
I mean, of course it matters, because if the same bullet didn't do all the damage, then there had to be shooters, because Oswald's rifle couldn't be operated that quickly. And the governor always said he was hit by a separate bullet.
Right. No, and if we can, just real quick to catch people up, the Warren Commission was due to the fact that President LBJ signed an executive order and put the Warren Commission together to study the assassination. Along with the Chief Justice Warren, Arlen Specter was a young upstart from Philadelphia at the time, an aggressive prosecutor who was the man who actually came up with the single bullet theory. Because what the Warren Commission ended up saying was, basically, in a nutshell, Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. He fired 3 shots. They accounted for all of the shots, and the one shot had to create 7 wounds. It had to pass through JFK and Conley and create all 7 wounds. And Arlen Specter is the person who put that forth. They did not. The Warren Commission did not acknowledge witnesses in Dealey Plaza who said that they had saw smoke, that they had heard gunshots from the grassy knoll. People that rushed up to the fence and beyond the fence that were told to go away by Secret Service people who weren't even accounted for in that area. But yet all of that was completely omitted from the Warren Commission. And many people right from the beginning didn't buy that, which is why we'll get into a little bit later in the 1970s, why the House Select Committee on Assassinations got together and did a 2.5-year investigation. But sticking with the Warren Commission right now, when the single bullet theory was put forth, what were your thoughts when you first read the single bullet theory, and when you were getting into that in your research? What were your thoughts when you first heard about that one shot creating 7 wounds?
Well, they always said, David Bellin and all the rest of the commission said, well, if the bullet didn't hit Governor Connolly, where did it go? Okay. Well, there was a bullet that hit President Kennedy in the back, okay, that fell out, that didn't go all the way through and was recovered and fell out of his body. There were 2 agents, FBI agents at the autopsy named Siebert and O'Neill, who collected a bullet that was an additional bullet that wasn't really accounted for. And the one main smoking gun that destroys the single bullet theory is that, and this was something that was discovered many, many years ago. No one has just discovered this today. Mark Lane brought it to the attention of the American public back in the 60s that the bullet, okay, was completely unscathed. There wasn't hardly missing any of it. It was completely intact.
Right.
It was not bent. It was not, half of it wasn't missing or anything. More grains of metal were discovered in the governor's chest and wrist than were missing from that bullet. So it couldn't have been that bullet.
Well, and another question, James Tague, down by the Triple Overpass. Now, this is someone that you actually interviewed and talked with. Is that correct?
Yes, I've talked to him many times. He's a very nice man.
And he got a fragment that hit him.
He was hit by a ricochet from one of the shots, and he was having a hard time getting the attention of Washington to make this testimony. And he went to a high Texas political figure, I don't remember the name of the person, who contacted the government for him and said, you must interview this James Tague. Now, I've talked to him many times. I consider him a friend. His book called Truth Withheld is excellent. And I would tend to say that he is one witness who is still alive that I would say supports that there was a conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. And he also feels that his testimony that there was a missed shot they tried to cover that up, that there was a missed shot. Because if there was a missed shot, then they had to account for all the wounds with, say, only 2 bullets, not 3.
Right.
And he's still down in Texas, and he's of course retired. So
where does he think the bullet came from that hit him? Does he think that came from Lee Harvey Oswald, or did that come from another location, or what were his thoughts?
Well, the way that it was lined up, his first impression was that the shots came from the grassy knoll. But he said also that it could possibly have come from over back by the building also, because they were lined up in a way where it could have been either or. Okay. I would tend to think that the shot that hit him most probably came from one of the buildings behind the motorcade. So I don't have any evidence of that. And he had a hard time getting the attention of the government to actually go and give his testimony, and his testimony changed the outcome of the Warren Commission's conclusions. Without the single bullet theory, it's 2 shooters.
Right.
Without it, if it's disproven, then there had to be 2 shooters, because Oswald's rifle could only have been operated and within a certain amount of time. And if you look at the Zapruder film, Kennedy is hit, and Connolly is still sitting there with his hat in his hand.
Yep.
And he's already, at that point, he's sitting there, not making any face or anything, any reaction, and he's been hit in the back, and then it went into his wrist and his chest, and then it ended up in his thigh.
Yeah.
And then what is it, about 5, then he starts to make a turn.
Yeah.
Okay, so, if he's already been hit and very wounded, he didn't seem to be hit until quite a few seconds after
Right.
His shot hit President Kennedy.
And we'll pick up there after this break. If you have a question for Harry or myself about JFK, give us a call, 502-571-0970. We'll be back with more on the JFK assassination on Resistance Radio.
We need to talk about everything. The Hugh Hewitt Show. Weekday evenings at 6 on 970 WGTK.
Welcome back to Resistance Radio, the JFK special. And my guest tonight, Harry Yardum. If you got a call, if you have a question, you want to give us a call, we'll be taking questions all the way up until midnight, 502-571-0970. And before we go any further, I got to play a little clip here just to give everybody the sense of who this guy was. Tom, play RR2 for me.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask
People today
not
believe that it was just
what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
There you go. I mean, what an incredible man. And you can understand when you know who JFK was, why certain members of the CIA and the FBI and other branches of government, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, weren't really happy with this guy, weren't really at ease with JFK.
Well, JFK and his brother were trying to change a lot of things. You have to look exactly at, 1963 was a completely different time and place than 2012.
Absolutely.
And what were the Kennedys doing? Okay, before the Kennedys came into power, J. Edgar Hoover said the mafia didn't even exist.
Yeah.
Okay, then when the Kennedys came into power, Bobby went after them with a vengeance, and I believe before the Kennedys came into power, there was like maybe 30 or 40 of these organized crime figures that were targeted for prosecution. Within months after Robert Kennedy became Attorney General, it's up to like 250 of these people. Right. And the top ones are putting a lot of pressure on. Right.
So they rattled some cages in Washington. They were bucking the system.
They did, and the firing of all the CIA men.
Yeah, I mean,
I believe that certain people within the CIA had something to do with this. Now, Dulles, who was the head of it, was fired.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I find it very hard to believe that maybe half a dozen of his close associates would get together and possibly, do this, and him have absolutely no knowledge of it at all. I do not believe. I do not believe. I'm not saying that he was part of the conspiracy, but I do not believe that he knew nothing was going on. I don't believe that for a minute. And so you've got the organized crime they're trying to destroy. The CIA, they were going to take it over and have Robert run it.
Yeah, JFK said he was going to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces.
Into 1,000 pieces.
Yeah.
Hoover was going to be
held accountable for the first time ever. Yeah.
And once Johnson got in there, he let him stay in his job for the rest of his life when Kennedy was going to... Johnson himself was going to be removed from the 64 ticket. Okay, so you have all these, the oil people in Texas. Kennedy was initiating a percentage of their profits that was going to be taxed, which would have cost them billions.
Yeah.
So you have at least 4 or 5 different aspects here of different people and different walks of life who the Kennedys are, costing them a lot of money here.
Right. And since you bring up oil people and CIA people, I also have to throw out there, the speculation that George Herbert Walker Bush was in front of the Texas Depository that day.
There are pictures that many people claim that are of him in the area of the depository. There's even a photograph taken from where Abraham was Zapruder, that area of people in the infield grass.
Mm-hmm.
That some people even say that there's a picture of E. Howard Hunt walking through the infield grass.
Unbelievable. I do want to get back to talk to you about some of the witnesses, but first I've got William on the line. William's calling in with a question, and I want to get to him and find out what's on his mind. William, what's up tonight?
Well, I've studied that assassination since 1996.
Okay.
And I remember when I was a child of, I'm saying, Vice President Johnson had the bullet-riddled limousine removed to be refurbished.
Yes.
There was a shot in the windshield, through the windshield. Another shot where the top of the canopy hits, and it's also got a crack in the window there. So, counting the missed shots, and bear with me, please, because
sure.
I have pondered this for years until Robert Groden said one time, and I've always thought it was volley fire. And Robert Groden said, during the first volley, and when he said that, I said, God damn. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't say that on the air. I said, man, I'm right. They had a guy with the umbrella and the guy across the street with the walkie-talkie, and it was ready, aim, fire.
Right.
Ready, aim, fire. I've calculated how many bullets there were shot at that limousine, and of course, you'll notice the Secret Service limousine backs off when the shooting really gets going.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what I've heard and read as well. And Harry, feel free to jump in here with your knowledge. But yes, the limousine was taken, it was cleaned, it was stripped. So as far as getting evidence of bullet holes and blood splatter and things like that, that evidence was pretty much lost to us. Harry, what do you know about that?
There was, in the 80s and 90s, I'm sure most JFK researchers have seen it, the men who killed Kennedy. And there is one section of this. There were 9 parts to this. The one on Johnson was banned from being broadcast. It was the Johnson family and Ford, and they all got together and they ganged up against the History Channel. And this one, you can still get it on the black market, but it was taken off. But there was one segment of a person, I forget his name, who was an expert on the limousine.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that all the evidence was taken out. It was completely scrapped. They even scrapped the windshield.
Mm.
So if you want to know more about the evidence on the car
mm-hmm.
and how it was destroyed, this Men Who Killed Kennedy, it's one of the later episodes, maybe the 5th or 6th, something like that.
Deals with...
It wasn't one of the original episodes that was released.
Can I comment on something?
Goes into detail of
Sure.
the car.
Sure. Go ahead, William. You got another comment?
Yes, I've got a DVD here that Robert Groden did. We all know who he was. And just happens to be 1 or 2 frames or a section when they were at the emergency room. If you look at that car, you can see the bullet holes.
Mm.
And I have counted to myself, knowing the misses, the one with Tag, the one next to the sewer manhole cover on the left side of the street,
Mm-hmm.
One that hit the concrete there, one that hit the street. And I come up with 3 teams of shooters, possibly a 4th, but I believe there's only 3 teams shooting volley fire, 4 shots. That's why on the last shot, somebody was late and you heard boom, boom.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, William, thank you very much for your call. Appreciate it.
About the letter from Christian David, he has got to be dead now. And we know Lucien Sarti was probably one on the grassy knoll. Could this man help me to understand if Christian David is dead, and has his letter been read?
There you go, Harry. Did you hear that?
Yes, yes.
I'm going to turn up volume.
Sarti definitely a suspect. There's been a handful of people over the years that have been. One of the early ones was a CIA guy named Charles Rogers, and then they had Roscoe White in the 90s, who was a Dallas policeman. And probably one of the more well-known ones is this gentleman named James Files, who said that he was working with the mafia.
Yes.
If you listen to James Files' story, if it's not true, he sure has a very good memory for details and things, because
sure does.
He sounds like somebody who actually experienced these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I find
no
his
way of
story
knowing
to be,
if he's telling the truth or not.
Yeah. His story is very chilling.
His testimony and which you can get it, you can buy it and listen to it. And, you know, if it's not a true story, he was coached very well, because
absolutely.
Same with Judith Baker, the lady who said that she knew Oswald. If you look at her book is so put together, so professional, so detailed, that I don't believe someone could make up stories like this.
Okay, well, listen, we'll pick it up right there after these commercials. It's JFK on Resistance Radio.
Join the Resistance now. Call 502-571-0970. That's 502-571-0970.
Conservatives get an early start every day with me, Bill Bennett, on Morning in America. Weekday mornings at 6 on 970 WGTK.
And welcome back to The Resistance. Jim Coyle, your guide through the chaos all the way up until the new day. That's right, we're here until midnight. Tonight, a little bit different kind of show. We're doing a retrospective on the JFK assassination. I've got Harry Yardum on the line with me. Harry is an author. He has been researching and following the JFK story since he was 13 years old. So, Harry, you've said you've got over 500 books in your personal library, a vast knowledge and wealth of information. So always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm sitting here going through, I've got some audio stuff I've pulled out, and there's so much to get to. And we're already almost done our first hour, and we haven't even gotten to the House Select Committee. I had a feeling this was going to happen just because there is so much information, and there is so much that has been repressed over the years. You know, I just wanted to get back into the witnesses that you talked to, and the witnesses from Dealey Plaza that have been overshadowed and silenced over the years. So let's dig into that for a little bit here in this segment.
Well, I met Jean Hill in '93 at the 30th anniversary, and she passed away not too long after that. So I had the chance to meet her. A very nice lady, and confirmed her story for the 1,000th time to me. Mm-hmm. And I believe Jean Hill's story, because if you listen to the reports from that day, okay,
mm-hmm.
Jean Hill said that the shots came from across the street from the grassy knoll.
Right, and so people know who she is. If they've seen the Zapruder film, she is the lady in red who is on the far side of Zapruder. So you have Zapruder, and then you have the Kennedy limousine, and then you have Jean Hill on the other side of the grass.
That's right.
Looking to the president, and she said that she stepped toward, and if I'm wrong, correct me, but she stepped towards the limo and said, "Mr. President," right before the shot was fired. So she was in a line of sight that said that put her directly across from, or pretty much directly across from where that shot, that final shot from the grassy knoll would have come from.
Right. Now, she said it that day. Now, there are many pro-Oswald did it alone people saying that she was crazy, that she was lying, and this and that she made up more things over the years. Jean Hill was threatened to be killed, and her children, many, many times, and told to not discuss this case. The minute that the assassination was over, and she ran towards the fence, a lot of researchers know the story about how two Secret Service agents picked her up and physically dragged her halfway across Dealey Plaza up into one of the courts buildings, and they're telling her there was only 3 shots, There's no way that you could have heard this, and blah, blah, blah. And then when Arlen Specter came to Dallas to interview her, most of the witnesses from Dallas, she didn't go to Washington because her boyfriend was one of the motorcycle policemen. I think his name was B.J. Martin. And they were pretty close, and she wouldn't go to Washington because she was threatened to be killed on that trip.
Wow.
So she didn't go to Washington, and they came to Dallas, and they interviewed all the witnesses at some municipal courthouse. She was the only witness, or one of the only few witnesses, or the only one that was interviewed at Parkland Hospital, and she believed that she was not allowed to testify with all the other Dallas people who were witnesses in the same day in the same building because her story was contradictory to Oswald did it alone.
Wow. And see, there again, instantly, as soon as the shots were fired, the president hasn't even gotten to Parkland yet. They've got Jean Hill sequestered, telling her it was 3 shots and you didn't see this. You heard echoes. It was something else. The sun was in your eyes. So, to hear that and realize they didn't know who the shooter was at this time, or they shouldn't have. They shouldn't have known who the shooter was. They shouldn't have known how many shots were fired. They shouldn't have known anything at that point, and they should have been welcoming her information. The fact that that's exactly opposite
telling
what
you this
happened.
Before they even found the rifle.
Yeah.
How? How could they know that at that time? It was too soon after the shooting for them to have any details as to how many shots, where they came from. Of course, they found these 3 shell casings in the window.
Right.
And there were quite a few people who saw somebody with a rifle in the window. But there was more than one person who saw 2 people in the Oswald supposed perch.
Absolutely.
Somebody with a rifle and somebody standing next to that person. And there was a guy named Johnny Powell who was in jail, in the same jail which was where Jack Ruby was in the last days of his life, which was parallel to the plaza, and he could see in the window and saw there was 2 people.
Yeah.
There was a woman down on the street who was on Houston Street who looked up and saw 2 men in the window.
Yeah.
Okay,
there's even
more than one person saw 2 people in the 6th floor window.
Absolutely. I've actually even seen photographs, and it's, again, it's not conclusive, but you can see the outline of 2 people in the window. I don't know. I think that I think there's definitely something to that.
Yes, there were 2 people there in that window for sure.
Yeah,
they were witnesses.
Now, tell me about Powers and O'Donnell.
Okay,
we were talking about them during the break.
Your main grassy knoll witnesses, the ones that had the most visibility, were Jean Hill, a gentleman by the name of S.M. Holland. He went by the name of Skinny. He worked for the Union Terminal Railroad. He was on top of the railroad bridge.
Right.
And a gentleman in a tower behind the fence by the name of Lee Bowers.
Yep.
These are the 3 main ones who indicated there was gunfire from the fence area. But 2 very overlooked witnesses who were kind of, how can I say, well, they did not come forward and were not as visible in their feelings or their testimony as Jean Hill or Sam Holland or Lee Bowers. Dave Powers and Ken O'Donnell were part of the Irish Mafia who were with President Kennedy from his days as a congressman. They were from Massachusetts, and they were part of his inner circle. They were his 2 closest aides. Most people don't know, and even some seasoned researchers that I've talked to didn't realize that they were in the car directly behind JFK in the Secret Service car that Clint Hill was on, and when he jumped off that running board and to get Jackie back into the seat.
Right.
They were there, and even Dave Powers had taken some film that was not released for many years, and he had just run out of film when he got into Dealey Plaza.
Now, is he the one that shot the film of the CIA or Secret Service standing down before they make the turn? Because there's footage that I've seen. The Secret Service are running behind the car, and you know they've got those running boards and handles where they could step up on the back of the limousine.
Right.
And as the limousine is making the turn, I believe it's the turn onto Houston before they make the turn onto Elm, Secret Service is told to stand down. And you see the Secret Service turn, and he shrugs his shoulders. He's still kind of following the car, and eventually he drops away.
All I've seen of the Powers film is it's taken, of course, directly behind JFK's car, and they're driving down the street. And all I've seen of the Dave Powers film was just the car just going down the street and just back of JFK's head and Jackie and this and that.
Okay.
I haven't seen the whole thing. If it's been released or not, it's hard to find it. And it could be on YouTube, but they were directly behind, so they were right there in the kill zone.
Right.
Okay. In 1987, Tip O'Neill, who was another Massachusetts politician who was close with the Kennedys and their inner circle, there was a dinner at a restaurant up in Boston called Jimmy's Harborside Restaurant. Now, he writes this story in his book, and then Mark Lane also published this story in his book, Plausible Denial, and I also have it also in my book. And if I could just read you a couple of quotes quickly about what went down at that dinner.
We got about a minute until our break, so go ahead.
Okay, and this is Tip O'Neill. He goes, I was never one of those people who was suspicious about the Warren Commission reporting on Kennedy's death, but 5 years after Jack died, I was having dinner with Kenny O'Donnell and a few other people at Jimmy's Harborside in Boston. I was surprised to hear O'Donnell say that he was sure he heard 2 shots come from behind the fence.
Wow. All right. Well, hey, listen, thank you for sticking around with me. We got another hour to go. We've got the House Select Committee to talk about. We've got a whole lot more to dive into at the CIA. So if you guys have questions, be sure to pick up the phone and give us a call, 571-0970. We'll be right back.
WGTK, Louisville, a division of Salem Communications.
Welcome back to Resistance Radio, Hour 2, taking you all the way up until midnight, till Monday morning. We're here with you. Don't worry about it. Tonight, very special edition of Resistance Radio, a look at the JFK assassination 49 years later. My guest on the phone with me tonight for the entire night, and I thank him so much for giving up his time and being here, Harry Yardum. And Harry, this isn't easy for you. Not only is it a late night, but you also just getting over Sandy. You're up there in Long Island, New York, correct?
That's right.
How are things coming up there as far as Sandy goes? I mean, last time we talked, it was still a little rough, but things getting back to some sort of normalcy for you?
Well, unfortunately, we had a store down by the seashore area of Long Island, which was completely ravished by water.
Oh.
And it's got to be completely gutted and rebuilt, and we're dealing now with the landlord and insurance company, so that was our main thing.
Right.
We live in a townhouse in the middle of Long Island, which didn't get any water or anything. So,
Good.
But there's still a lot of damage. It's the worst storm I've ever seen in my life anywhere in New York.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very sad. A lot of people lost a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people have been reaching out and trying to help. I would encourage people to do that, continue to do that, because it's going to take a long time to really rebuild that whole area from the Jersey Shore. Actually, even below that, from down in Delaware all the way up to.
There's a town near here called Long Beach, which was completely ravaged. I mean, there's a part of Long Beach called the West End of Long Beach, and everybody's got everything they own right in front of the house.
Yeah.
It's a real mess, but with God's help, we'll get back on our feet.
Absolutely. Well, again, I thank you for the commitment, the 2-hour commitment to be here tonight, and
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
We
talked
can't fit everything in 2 hours.
No, we can't. And for a time constraint, I'm going to kind of chop things down here a little bit. In the first hour, we talked a lot about the Warren Commission, and I've got a clip here I'm going to play. This is actually taken from the Oliver Stone film, but it kind of is a little synopsis on the Warren Commission. So, Tom, go ahead and play track 4.
The Warren Commission thought they had an open and shut case. 3 bullets, 1 assassin. But 2 unpredictable things happened that day that made it virtually impossible. One, the 8mm home movie taken by Abraham Zapruder while standing near the grassy knoll. And 2, the 3rd wounded man, James Tague, who was nicked by a fragment while standing near the triple underpass. The time frame, 5.6 seconds, established by the Zapruder film, left no possibility of a full shot. So the shot of fragment that left a superficial wound on Tague's cheek had to come from one of the 3 bullets fired from the 6th floor of the depository. That leaves just 2 bullets. And we know one of them was the fatal headshot that killed Kennedy. So now a single bullet remains. A single bullet now has to account for the remaining 7 wounds in Kennedy and Conley. But rather than admit to a conspiracy or investigate further, the Warren Commission chose to endorse the theory put forth by an ambitious junior counselor, Arlen Specter, one of the grossest lies ever forced on the American people. We've come to know it as the magic bullet theory. The magic bullet enters the president's back, headed downward at an angle of 17 degrees. It then moves upward in order to leave Kennedy's body from the front of his neck. Wound number 2, where it waits 1.6 seconds, presumably in midair, where it turns right, then left, right, then left, and continues into Conley's body at the rear of his right armpit. Wound number 3. The bullet then heads downward at an angle of 27 degrees, shattering Conley's 5th rib and exiting from the right side of his chest. Wound number 4. The bullet then turns right and re-enters Conley's body at his right wrist. Wound number 5. Shattering the radius bone, the bullet then exits Conley's wrist. Wound number 6. Makes a dramatic U-turn and buries itself into Conley's left thigh. Wound number 7, from which it later falls out and is found in almost pristine condition on a stretcher in a corridor of Parkland Hospital. That's some bullet. Anyone who's been in combat will tell you never in the history of gunfire has there been a bullet this ridiculous.
There you go. So that's in a nutshell the Warren Commission.
Yes.
And we've got just a couple minutes left in this segment here, so go ahead and let me know, what are your final thoughts on the Warren Commission before we move on to the House Select Committee and other aspects of it?
Surprisingly enough, David Bellin said that he tried to prove to the commission that there was a second gunman and that the single bullet theory came out of him trying to prove that there was a second gunman. And it's impossible for that bullet to have done all those things for the simple reason, what I said at the beginning of the show, that the amount of deposits of metal from a bullet, which were found in the governor's chest and wrist, were more than was missing from that bullet.
Unbelievable.
So it could not have been that bullet. And I'll add one last thing to that. Since we're talking about the Warren Commission, David Bellin...
We got 5 seconds. How about we pick it up on the other side of the break?
We'll come back to that.
After this.
If you can hear my voice, the resistance needs you. Call 502-571-0970.
We're keeping you ahead of the mainstream media. The Mike Gallagher Show. Weekday mornings at 9 on 970 WGTK.
Welcome back. Resistance Radio, JFK special. Harry Yardum is my guest for the full 2 hours. And we're kind of sort of trying to wrap up at least the first part of this. It's hard to wrap up any part of this because everything leads to something else. You know, that's what I find. But the Warren Commission, we've basically have gone through that. A couple of quick things I want to play here just to kind of real quick, play track 6, because part of this whole thing of the Warren Commission is Lee Harvey Oswald is a single shooter. And when Lee Harvey Oswald was taken into custody, there was only a couple of things that he said that actually was documented. Tom, play track 6 for me.
I don't know what this is all about.
Kill the president?
No, so I did. People keep asking me Sir?
Shoot the president?
I work in that building.
Were you in the building at the time?
Naturally, if I work in that building, yes, sir.
Back up, man. Did you shoot the president?
No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I live in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
President?
There you go. That's Lee Harvey Oswald. He's saying, I was in the building. Of course I was in the building. I work in the building. I didn't shoot anybody. They're only taking me in because I spent time in Russia. I'm a patsy. That's what we heard from Oswald. I'm a patsy. What are your feelings on that, Harry? Was he the patsy?
Well, there's a book coming out, and I heard through the grapevine that in this book, which I won't say the name yet because it's not out yet, there is a chapter on the aspect that Oswald was talking to an employee when the shots went off, and this employee looked at him, and they looked at each other, and they heard the shots go off.
Wow.
So that means he was not on the 6th floor when the shots went off.
Very interesting. I got Phil on the line. Phil, thanks for holding through the break. What's on your mind tonight?
Harry, how you doing?
Phil Singer. Phil Singer is a great JFK researcher from Illinois and a good man.
Oh, excellent. Great. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you. Harry, why don't you tell the people what you think the strongest evidence is for a shot from behind the picket fence on the North Grassy Knoll?
Well, in the early days, it was basically the witnesses. Now, I always approached this that if it was one or two people saying that this had occurred, you say, what? But when you have 10, 20, 30, 40 people all saying the same exact thing, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, as the years went on, it was not just, even though my book is The Grassy Knoll Witnesses, there is other evidence pointing to a shot from the front. And on the House Select Committee, they interviewed all the doctors and the nurses who said that there was an exit wound in the back of the head, proving that the shot, came from hit him in the temple and blew out the back. That was completely sealed and classified till like 2029.
Wow.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So they interviewed all the people who said this was a shot from a front, and then they just completely suppressed that evidence. So the medical evidence of the shot from the front backs up what the witnesses say. Now, there are some later in years it came out that, well, if it came from the side there, it went out the left side of Kennedy's head and maybe even hit Jackie in the face. And I can understand people saying that. But the fence is a long fence line.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the shooter was at a certain point on the fence line and the car was at a certain point, it would almost be like shooting straight ahead and where it would have lined up. So, depending exactly where that shooter was, it could have lined up, and in my opinion, and like many others, there was somebody there.
Yeah. Now, I've also read there's over 20 attending doctors who all agreed that the autopsy photos and reports that came out of Parkland Hospital were all were doctored.
That's right. There was a photographer who was a White House photographer by the name of Robert Knudsen, who was at the autopsy, and he took pictures of the head and showed him to certain. He had an office in the White House. He was one of the official photographers. Showed it to some of his colleagues. Then he got another set of these photographs, and he showed it to his colleagues again. And they said, "What is that?" He said, "The hole in the back of." There are photographs that show the hole in the back of the head.
Wow.
The right, And then when he got the photographs back again, the hole had been covered up professionally neatly, and not only was there a little bullet hole in the back of his head that looked like an entrance wound, it was drawn in with a pencil by the House Select Committee. Okay, so the official autopsy photograph of the ones that they have are drawings done by an artist by the name of Ida Docks, who actually drew the bullet hole in with a pencil.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so all the doctors at the hospital and all the doctors and everybody who was at the autopsy, they all confirmed that it was an exit wound that blew the back of the right side out, scientifically proving. And then a few years back, there were these 5 volumes by a gentleman by the name of Douglas Horn, who was with the Assassination Records and Review Board, and that is a very good documentation of how this autopsy was covered up and botched, and the photographs were made to look that it was someone shooting from behind.
Unbelievable.
So they were actually doctored, and Robert Groden has been saying this for many years, and I tip my hat to him. A lot of the books and videos he's released, I have them, and I think they're very good. And he caught on to this X-ray problem long ago. And I respect what he has done on the case.
Excellent. Hey, Phil, anything else you want to add to the conversation here?
The thing about this case is, it's now 49 years ago that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, as we all know. And if this was like what you'd call a normal case, there'd be a whole lot less loose ends. Everything by now would kind of tie together and make sense and kind of be one coherent package, so to speak.
Right.
But it's really the exact opposite. It's a real mess, and almost all the evidence is inconclusive and contradictory, and it's a shame. But it's the nature of this particular case is that there's so much, I think, that was covered up or destroyed or substituted early on that it makes it a real mess even to this day to try to reconstruct what the true facts and parameters of the assassination was, what gun, how many bullets, where the wounds were. A lot of this is still kind of confusing to a lot of people because there's so much contradictory evidence, and it's a shame. But I will say that even after 49 years, more and more information is coming out and will continue to come out over the next couple of years, and I think you'll see a massive wave of it in the next 13 months. There'll be a lot more books and information about things we don't know.
Yeah, well,
I've been in touch with some of the researchers and other authors that have been digging into this up until right now, and there is new things that are going to continue to come out that'll, I think, help all of us find out what truly happened that day.
Absolutely, and of course, next year being the 50 year, I kind of sort of expect a lot to come out then, which is actually one of the reasons why I want to do something at the 49th year. Stay a little bit ahead of the curve, and reading what Harry has done and following his Facebook stuff. I thought he'd be a great source to have on. Phil, I appreciate your contribution here tonight, and if we just, you go back to. Again, I know there's a lot of inconsistencies in the Oliver Stone film, but if you go back to the film, there's a great moment where Jim Garrison, played by Kevin Costner, is talking about how this might have to be a generational thing that we pass down to our children and our grandchildren before we get to the truth. And I was lucky enough that my dad kind of passed that fire down onto me, and you guys are out there continuing this effort, passing that information on, and that might be how we get to the bottom of it. It's going to take a while, but as long as we don't let that, we don't let it die out, we don't let it just, we don't cave into the incredibly crazy allegations of the Warren Commission and such, and we continue to look, we will eventually find daylight.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. That's very well stated.
Well, thank you, and thanks for being part of the show tonight, Phil. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for calling in, Phil.
Good luck, Harry, man.
Talk to you.
All right, and if anybody else out there has a question, we got another half hour of the show left to go. 502-571-0970 is the number to call. And, you know, Harry, we only have a couple minutes to the bottom of the hour, but I do want to start moving towards the House Select Committee, because this is something that I think a lot of people, who have trouble believing the conspiracy, and you know, granted, it might only be about 35-40% of the public that still believe it's only Lee Harvey Oswald and 3 shots. But even that group, or other people that aren't as well informed, they don't really know about the House Select Committee on Assassinations and what it did. This is another government commission which took almost 3 years to complete another investigation. And they did not only the JFK assassination, but they looked into the Martin Luther King assassination as well. And they said that for both of those, there was elements of conspiracy. The House Select Committee, at the end of the day, was completely off from the Warren Commission. They said there were at least 4 shots and 2 gunmen. And at the end of the day, that the Justice Department should continue the investigation. And why do people not look to this?
And they said that they must now find this shooter, and they did not act on that. Yeah. I mean, nobody acted on it, and yet, and people who don't buy into the conspiracy don't look at this and say, "Wow, this is the House Select Committee said there were at least 2 shooters, at least 4 shots, and the Justice Department should investigate." Why didn't more people buy into that, and why didn't more people put pressure for something to happen? That's a good question. The researchers, like Phil Singer, didn't stop when the House Select Committee stopped. They kept going.
Right.
And they're still going today.
Yeah.
Getting back to the House Select Committee, I just want to just throw something in there. David Bellin was even interviewed, this gentleman on the Warren Commission was interviewed by the House Select Committee, and there was, in 1988, there was a special by Geraldo Rivera, and David Bellin was on this, so was Gene Hill, Jim Mars, many, many, many people, and during this show, David Bellin tried to make an example out of Gene Hill and how she was so confused, saying that there was a fuzzy white dog in the car.
Oh, no.
Bellin saying that, but it turned out to be a lamb chop doll. Shari Lewis. There's a photograph of Jackie holding this doll under her arm.
Pick it up right after this. Welcome back. The last half hour of Resistance Radio tonight, dealing with the JFK assassination. And Harry, I knew this was going to happen. We could go another 2 hours and still have plenty to talk about. When we went to the break, you were telling us about how they were trying to discredit some of the witnesses, and Jean Hill, who said she saw a white, or they were saying that there was no white dog in the car. And go ahead and finish that story up for us.
Let me explain this. Mm-hmm. Jean Hill was criticized by many people as to being a liar. Okay, I met her personally, and this woman was not a liar. God rest her soul. Okay, she had said that there, on the day of the assassination, that there was a white fuzzy dog between Jackie and JFK. Now, David Bellin got a hold of this and Spector and said that there was no white fuzzy dog there. She's not seeing correctly, so she couldn't have seen or heard any shot from the front. Okay? There's a photograph that surfaced a few years back that was never seen of President Kennedy and Jackie at the airport, and in her hand is a white, fuzzy lamb chop doll from this Shari Lewis. She used to have a TV show with the lamb chop.
Right, the puppet.
That's what she mistook for a little fuzzy white dog.
Unbelievable.
So she was not lying when she said she saw this little fuzzy white dog. It just happened to be a lamb chop doll instead of a dog.
Right.
Okay, so they tried to make her look like she was crazy. And Spector even told her that if she continued on this path of pounding away, that there was a shooter from the front, that they, meaning the authorities, would make her look as crazy as Marguerite Oswald, and quote Spector.
Yeah.
And everybody knows how crazy she is. Okay,
right.
So they literally threatened to destroy her reputation if she continued on this path. And on the day it happened and up to the day she died, she said the shot that killed President Kennedy came from the grassy knoll. Now, like I said at the beginning of the show, you have one or two saying this, you say, what?
Yeah.
But if you have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people, there are witnesses who said that the shot came from the grassy knoll that people don't even know their names.
Yeah.
There's a guy that was up on the underpass by the name of Frank Riley. People don't know who Frank Riley is. He happened to be, I believe he worked also for the Union Terminal.
Now, is he the one who actually saw someone running through the parking lot behind the fence after the shot? Was that that witness?
No,
or was that Skinny?
was a gentleman by the name of J.C. Price.
J.C. Price.
Who was overlooking Dealey Plaza on one of these buildings that was on the south side, one of these high buildings. It was overlooking the whole thing.
Right.
He saw somebody running away towards the tracks with a headpiece, like a microphone or something that you it looked like maybe a DJ headphone or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now there was also photographs of a gentleman sitting on the curb there of Dealey Plaza. They call the dark-complected man. I believe he was the one that with a hand raised in the Zapruder film.
Right, he was sitting next to Umbrella Man. This is the guy
That's
who
right. And
opened the
photograph
umbrella.
of him with a walkie-talkie up to his ear, looking right back up at the fence.
Right, so right before the final shot came, or as the shots unloaded, you had the Umbrella Man who stood up, opened up his umbrella, raised it up, brought it down and closed it. Then he sat down calmly next to the dark-complected man, who was then photographed with what looked like a walkie-talkie or radio up to his head.
Right, looking up. So, and he wasn't the only person. There was at least 5 or 6 people. Lee Bowers saw 3 cars come into the area of the fence, and he said that these gentlemen were talking into a microphone or a walkie-talkie. So you have at least a half a dozen people in Dealey Plaza communicating with whomever through walkie-talkie. What is that?
Right. Right.
So...
Well, we got another caller. We got Frank on the line. Frank, welcome to the show. And what's your question tonight?
Hey, thank you, gentlemen. Really, I've been fascinated by this thing I'm 43. I've been fascinated for years, since I was probably 10.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that keeps coming up is this Carlos Marcello guy. Everybody's heard
the Mafia.
New Orleans mob boss Carlos Marcello went to Marseille, and he picked up 2 guys named Lucien Sarti and another guy named Christian David.
Right.
And Sarti died in 1972. He was a drug trafficker. But the other guy, Christian David, tried to kill a police officer in France, in Paris, in 1966. Now, he's still in jail, and he's confessed. And he's confessed time and time again, and he's passed lie detector tests that he and Sarti were the guys behind the grassy knoll. And why isn't this brought up more? Because this is on the beat. The BBC, plays this every few years, and you see it on PBS every once in a while, or just whatever. Why don't we hear more about this?
Great question, Harry. What's your input on this one?
Well, since day one, the mainstream media, meaning the LA Times and the Herald Tribune and the This One and the Life magazines and the Walter Cronkates and the Dan Rathers, they all went with this Warren Commission conclusion. There was many. CBS was notorious for having these. They released at least 4 or 5 documentaries over the years, supporting that Oswald did this alone. Now, getting back to what this gentleman had just said, when Jim Garrison had his trial going on in '69, I had communication with him. And I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back personally, okay? People don't realize that David Ferry, who Garrison was trying to bring in as one of his suspects, who died before he could be brought in, worked directly and was the right-hand man and pilot of Carlos Marcello. He was the one that flew Marcello back into the United States after Robert Kennedy deported him to Guatemala.
Right.
But during the Garrison trial, Jim Garrison, for whatever reason, did not mention the name Carlos Marcello, who in subsequent years has turned out to be one of the prime suspects in this case.
Yes, his name continually comes up. And, you know, there's a couple. You have the Lee Harvey Oswald single shooter, and then you've got the CIA mafia conspiracy. You've got straight up mafia hitmen, the CIA Cuban exiles, and you also have the Soviet Union KGB investigation, which indicated a French hitman, which ties into what Frank was talking about.
Right.
When I look at it, you know, I see that there's a lot of overlap, and I think instead of having all these separate different theories, that the CIA, we know through Prohibition and right after Prohibition, became heavily involved in using a working relationship with the mafia out of Chicago. Now, when the CIA have black ops and they've got an operation set up to take out Castro, and they realize that they're not going to be able to take out Castro, they flip it, they go to take out Kennedy, and they set up Oswald as the patsy. They need somebody to come in and do the dirty work to clean it up. That's where the mafia comes in. That's where Jack Ruby comes in. The fact that there's probably 2 or 3 shooting teams, maybe that's where the French hitman comes in.
A very good early movie on the 3-shooter aspect was a film from 1973, happened to be the year I graduated from high school, called Executive Action. It was with Burt Lancaster. Very good movie. It was, you're talking about many years before JFK, and it still holds up today. And if you watch this film, and they're suggesting that a group of powerful men got together and said, we've got to get rid of Kennedy.
Yeah.
And this is what I believe happened. A bunch of powerful men came together and said, we've got to get rid of Kennedy. Now, I wanted to get into this aspect of how Watergate was directly tied into the Kennedy assassination.
Yes,
Can
and
I
I don't want to miss any of that because I think that's really interesting. And Frank, thank you very much for your call tonight. We appreciate it. Tom, how much time do we have left in this segment here? Okay, Harry, we only have about a minute and a half left, so I want to hold off to get that in because I think that is very intriguing, and I want to make sure that that doesn't get interrupted. So if you hang on for just a minute,
that after the commercial.
We'll do that after the commercial.
That's very interesting information.
Absolutely. And as far as just to kind of wrap up Frank's question there, this hitman over in France who's in jail who has confessed, have you heard?
Christian David, yeah.
Yeah, have you? And what is your feeling on him? Do you think he was part of the teams? Do you think he was in Dealey Plaza that day, or is he looking for honor, some sort of disgusting honor in being the person who pulled the trigger? What do you think is up with him?
I don't think that there is a lot of information. There's no real one book written about him on this case. So as far as who actually was the shooter.
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning of the show, there have been many names mentioned over the years. Charles Rogers, Sartee, Roscoe White, Files. Who it was, I don't know, but I'm convinced there was somebody back there.
And we've got a little bit more, so stick around. We'll be right back on Resistance Radio 970 WGTK.
Join the Resistance now. Call 502-571-0970. That's 502-571-0970.
Where V stands for victory, not victim, it's the Michael Medved Show. Weekday afternoons at 3 on 970 WGTK.
Welcome back. The final segments of Resistance Radio, and tonight we have been looking back at the JFK assassination. My guest for the full 2 hours, and I can't thank him enough for being a part of the show tonight, Harry Yardum. He is the author of The Grassy Knoll Witnesses, Who Shot JFK. And Harry, by the way, if people are looking to pick up your book, where can they get it?
They can get it. Only way they can get it autographed personally is on eBay. If they buy it on eBay, I'll autograph it personally to whomever they want as a gift or to themselves. And
Christmas is right around the corner.
When they get it on eBay, there's many different ones, but the one they have to look for is the one that's signed by me, and that's my listing.
Excellent. Okay.
So they can get it on eBay, and also if they want to get more on the case, they can go to the Facebook page, JFK, The Grassy Knoll Witnesses, and like it. And there's a lot of information that's been put on there in the last 2 years.
Treasure
a
trove.
lot.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess that's where recently when I stumbled across your Facebook page, I started getting all kinds of leads taking me in all kinds of different directions. But before we run out of time, we got about another 6-7 minutes here for you. I want you to tie it all together for us and throw in Watergate. Tell us how that connects.
Back in 1992, a year after JFK was released, a very well-known New York City radio personality did a 25-part series on the Kennedy assassination. And on this series, he had a gentleman, who I won't name his name, who gave this story. Now, I don't know how true it is, so I'm just repeating what I heard on the radio in 92, but this is not very known. Nixon, apparently, when he was vice president in the Eisenhower administration, was designated to create a shooter team called S-Force that was put together with the intent of killing Fidel Castro.
Right.
Okay? Richard Nixon thought that this file was in the safe of Larry O'Brien, the head of the Democratic Party, in the Watergate Hotel. And he felt that what had happened is that this shooter team that Nixon helped put together, at one point, these people that were behind this, and I believe that was some people in the CIA and some people in the Mafia, and Mr. Johnson's in the back there taking notes, was put together to kill Castro, and at some point in this, they switched it. And the plan was to abort the assassination of Castro and to kill President Kennedy himself. Now, Nixon, I'm not saying that he was a part of the conspiracy, but he felt that this file could be in the safe of Larry O'Brien. So he had his people go in and break into this file. Now, who was part of the break-in? Two people who have been long been suspected of being part of the Kennedy assassination, and they are been said over 1,000 times: E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. They were the ones that were part of this break-in. Now, Nixon felt that if this information came out, it would destroy his career, and what happened? It destroyed his career, but at the time, we were not told it was the Kennedy assassination as to why.
Right. And it makes sense, because you look at what the presidents have gone through in the past and what presidents go through now. To resign over trying to get some, files for the opponent's strategy seems like a pretty weak reason to resign, which is what I've always been told. That the Watergate, he was just trying to get the Democrats' strategy for winning the next election, who they were going to target, how they were going to get the vote out. And that always seemed like a very weak reason to break in, and an even weaker reason to resign as president of the United States.
No, he was behind this shooter team to kill Castro and felt that information in a file was in Larry O'Brien's safe, and he had to get that file out of there and destroy it, because he felt that information came out, that the public would turn on him. Now, they didn't even know the real reason then, and they still turned on him.
Yeah. And not saying that he had anything to do with
that file.
Right. Not that he had anything to do with it, but just that he got the team together that eventually turned and went after Kennedy. That link alone he thought was the threat.
That's right. He felt that, here is our country trying to kill a foreign leader.
Yeah.
Not only is that a crime and a sin, but then that was turned around and our own president was killed by this shooter team.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Harry,
that's the truth behind the Kennedy assassination.
I thank you so much for coming on here and sharing that with me tonight, and thank you so much for spending 2 hours of your time with me. I really, really appreciate it. Harry Yardum, author of the book, The Grassy Knoll Witnesses, Who Shot JFK. Thank you so much for being on the program. And, as new information comes out down the road, I'd like to tap into you again and bring you back on the show if you'll have me.
Oh, are you kidding? It was a pleasure of my life to be on your show, and God bless all you listeners out there. Keep the fires burning.
That's right. Keep them burning. Harry, thank you so very much. I'll talk to you down the road. Appreciate your time tonight.
Night.
Good night. All right, folks. Well, every week we have to have a Resistance Radio Song of the Week. This week is no different. This one, Tom, go ahead and cue it up. I'll talk over the intro here a little bit. This one is by Socrates Johnson. I don't know if it's Socrates or Socrates. Whatever. Socrates Johnson. We're going to go with the Bill and Ted version. It's called Rambler Man, and it kind of ties together all the different aspects of the shooting. Check it out. It's this week's Resistance Radio Song of the Week, Rambler Man. This really follows the story of Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig from the Dallas Police Force that we didn't even get a chance to dive into tonight. Could have done another 2 hours easily. So many people, so many witnesses, so many questions, so little time. We didn't even get to talk about Officer Tibbins and the shooting 45 minutes after the assassination. So many questions, so little time. Why did Lee Harvey Oswald walk into the theater without buying a ticket? And why did they send the entire Dallas police force to arrest a man for going into the movie theater without a ticket? And the Rambler in question that Deputy Craig saw Lee Harvey Oswald jump into with a dark-complected man, Lee Harvey Oswald said belonged to an old woman who helped watch his children. But he said, leave her alone, she's got nothing to do with this, and magically it all disappeared. What about all of the bums that were taken from the train cars and supposedly arrested and questioned, but yet there's no other questioning on file? What about Lee Harvey Oswald's own questioning before the assassination and afterwards? A lot of his testimony completely gone. Records completely disappeared. And if there is nothing to cover up, then why do you suppress records until 2029 and 2038? This is definitely more than meets the eye and always has been. I believe at the end of the day, the CIA flipped the switch and went from taking out Fidel Castro to taking out Kennedy because they thought he was going to break up the CIA. He wasn't happy with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He wasn't going to invade Cuba. He wasn't going to go to Vietnam. He had a different vision for America, and it scared the military-industrial complex just like Ike warned us about. Let us not seek the Republican answer, the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future.